I do want to take a moment and officially welcome all of you to the Divine Mercy University webinar on the Psy.D program that we have at the university. My name is Tambi Spitz-Kilhefner. I'm a part of the admissions team at DMU, and I'm actually going to be sharing with you this evening more on the Psy.D program. I do want to let you know that we also are very honored to have a special guest with us this evening. Isaiah Lamb is a student, a current student. There's Isaiah. Hi, Isaiah. He's a current student in the Psy.D program. He's a second year. So he's going to be joining us this evening as well, sharing just more personally on the program from his perspective. We are going to have and really be open to Q&A during the time that Isaiah's sharing as a part of this webinar. So do feel free to ask questions and prepare questions really for Isaiah as well as potentially for me. So it's really great to have a student here. So Isaiah, I just want to say thank you. Really appreciate having you here. And we look forward to hearing more from you a little bit later on in the webinar. So thank you. So what we're going to do as far as the schedule in this webinar, we are going to spend the first 20 minutes or so, maybe 30 at the most, going through this official presentation. And then what we're going to do from there is then bring Isaiah on. So we are going to cover a lot of details in that short amount of time, try to get some questions in there, but I really do want to make sure that we take advantage for your benefit of having a student with us this evening. So that's the plan. So we're going to go ahead and get started with just sharing about the program. And then again, a little bit later, about maybe 20, 30 minutes in, have Isaiah join us more officially and open up to discussion directly with him about his experience in the program from the student perspective. So again, thank you all so much for being here. I really do look forward to sharing more with you this evening. So just going to do a couple of cross checks here for recording. Again, make sure that you do feel free to use that Q&A feature, the chat feature. We'll try to take some breaks here and there, check that, and then respond as we can to any questions that you might have. And for those of you that are going to be watching this as a recording, unfortunately, while you won't be able to directly ask questions, hopefully the use of that chat feature from the folks with us tonight will also answer some of those questions as well post webinar, just when the recording is up and available. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So as I mentioned, my name is Tambi Spitz-Kilhefner. What is important to take away from this slide in front of you is really just the email, our email address and our contact information. I know I've had the pleasure actually of already interacting with some of you here this evening. I definitely encourage an outreach to our office, and one of us will definitely be very happy to help you, answering anything about the program that you weren't able to find out this evening. So the email that we use specifically for those interested in the Psy.D program, we do ask you to use the admissions email that's admissions.psyd@divinemercy.edu. That just gets you right to Psy.D folks to help you out with any questions that you have. So again, if you want to take note of that email, admissions.psyd@divinemercy.edu. I'm going to begin with a little bit about the university itself. Some of you may be familiar with Divine Mercy University prior to it actually being named Divine Mercy University. We actually began in 1999 as the Institute for the Psychological Sciences. During that time, we had a Psy.D program as well as a master's in clinical psychology. And we had that for a number of years until we decided to expand our program offerings in 2014 by offering an online MS in general psychology that was a non-practitioner, non-clinical degree. So basically for the helping professions. That program has been really successful for the university. We know that it's provided, a really unique educational perspective for those individuals who aren't able to come and study with us on site, but also further who don't actually need a full, background or a degree, if you will, in a counseling or a clinical field, but rather more just for triaging and using it in their already established careers that are maybe related to mental health, but again, they're not looking to be practitioners. So that program was launched in 2014, again, as a part of IPS. That was so successful, we decided to continue with that expansion. And in 2015, we actually renamed the university from IPS to Divine Mercy University, and we added a School of Counseling. So just to kind of lay this out for you here a little bit further, we actually then, when we became Divine Mercy University, we actually kind of broke up into two schools, or if you could say added, made the university an overarching university with two schools within it. The School of Counseling was added, as we noted just a moment ago. And with that school, we actually began a counseling program that's online. So some of you may be interested in that as well and learning more about that, or have family members or friends who could be interested as well in our counseling program. Fantastic program. It's an online hybrid program that, again, is housed under our School of Counseling. Then we go back to IPS, or the Institute for the Psychological Sciences. And within that school, we have 2 programs. The online MS in psychology program that we mentioned was added in 2014. And then, of course, the program that we're speaking about tonight, which is the Psy.D program. The Psy.D program really is, in many ways, just the birth of the concept of our university, which really is truly unique, which we'll talk more about this evening as well. So the Psy.D in clinical psychology really was the initiator for the whole concept for Divine Mercy University. So a little bit about our history there for you. As we've shared, you can read this slide here. As we've shared, and as many of you already know, we do have a very unique mission and vision at Divine Mercy University. We do something really very different, something that really is completely unique to us. We actually offer the Catholic Christian metaphysical perspective combined with clinical psychology and counseling. So those are 2 things that come together. So it's going to be, again, the Catholic Christian anthropology of the person, marriage, and family, combined with the sciences of psychology and counseling. We're really blending those together. And at DMU, we call that integration. And we have a whole model built around that concept, which we'll also speak a little bit more about this evening. What's really unique about our university and that model of integration is that we really do view, wholeheartedly the validity of the science of psychology and counseling, but we also acknowledge and believe that science is fulfilled through the holistic understanding of the person. You're really using, again, that Catholic Christian meta model, the idea of where both philosophy and theology come together in combination with the sciences of psychology and counseling. That is, again, very much, that is central to our identity. That is something that to date, I haven't found really anywhere else. I do think we do that very specifically, very uniquely. And it is the foundation of how our university began, was this acknowledgement. And then that is how the whole university, evolved, was recognizing the science is valid, but so is this philosophical and theological understanding. And we needed to bring the 2 together to really have a holistic view of the human person. And so it really is, again, central to who we are, and really how we shape and model our programs to prepare our students for vocations as mental health professionals. The university is accredited, as is the program of clinical psychology. So important to understand a little bit about that. We actually are first accredited for our region. Every institution, not every, but most institutions are first regionally accredited, and then from there you can seek out additional accreditations as would be appropriate to your programs. So in the United States, we do accreditation by region, and then again, we specify, as would be appropriate for us. It would be with the Psy.D would be APA. So we do have SACS accreditation to operate, regionally. We actually have an acknowledgement by SHEV, an organization called SHEV, which gives us the ability to also further operate in the state of Virginia, which is where we are based out of, which is also where the Psy.D program does live. I mean, it is an on-site program in Sterling, Virginia. So we operate through the permissions of SHEV to be in Virginia. And then something that I'm sure everyone here really cares a lot about is understanding that the Psy.D and clinical psychology program is further accredited by APA, the American Psychological Association. We're very proud of that fact. We were awarded that accreditation in 2016. It's really very important that Psy.D programs do have that accreditation. Again, and DMU is certainly very proud that this program is accredited by the American Psychological Association that we've had, again, since 2016. If you have any questions about accreditation, do let me know that. We're happy to visit a little bit more about that. What I'd like to do as we kind of segue into, moving away from really the foundation of the university accreditation and into the program itself, is I do want to view for a moment what it means to be a clinical psychologist and what is clinical psychology. So we have a couple of things here. First, we have the definition by APA that clinical psychology is the psychological specialty that provides continuing and comprehensive mental health and behavioral health care for individuals and families. Further, clinical psychologists also do consultation to agencies and communities. They provide training, education, supervision, and everything is based, on research. So it's research-based practice. So that's, again, kind of an official snapshot from APA. Further, what I've learned helps folks to even gain a deeper understanding of clinical psychology is to understand that one of the hallmarks of clinical psychology, really the hallmark is a better way to phrase that, of clinical psychology is the ability to conduct and administer psychological tests and assessment so as to determine if there's a diagnosis or other things that could be happening with a client. This is a professional skill. It is reserved specifically for the psychologist. It requires specialized, highly skilled training and implementation. So that's something to really understand that I think really separates clinical psychology from other licensable mental health professions such as counseling or social work or similar, is that clinical psychologists have this unique and distinct ability to conduct psychological testing and assessment, again, with the goal of determining if a diagnosis is present or, again, other pathologies. I want to be clear, psychology is not trying to seek out a diagnosis. It's their ability to determine if there is one. Again, much like a medical doctor. Medical doctor examines you and determines what's going on here. Is there a diagnosis? And makes their assessment through that. Very, very similar and kind of parallel to the work of a clinical psychologist, while also being obviously very different. So again, if you have questions about that differentiation between clinical psychology and other licensable mental health professions, go ahead and pop those in the chat or the Q&A, and we'll try to address those as well. So again, continuing on to discuss how our program works. Talked a little bit again, what is clinical psychology? Now we're going to talk about what is this program. Our program at DMU is a very wonderful, intensive program. It's academically very strong. It's built, with rigorous concepts in mind, things that really do have excellent training available to you as a prospective student. I think that's really, again, something to really note about our program is we do go above and beyond really what is required for training as a clinical psychologist. Our program specifically is 122 hours, 122 credit hours of graduate studies. It's what they call a direct admit program. So when you're admitted to our program, you're admitted for the whole program, which is a total of 5 years. You earn a master's along the way to earning your Psy.D. Okay, again, if you have questions about that, let me know. I do want to share that the master's that you earn is a more academic master's. It's not a clinical master's. So the clinical practice does come through the earning of the Psy.D degree versus earning it through the master's along the way. So if you are thinking, oh, I'm going to come and maybe do my master's and then stop there and then become a clinician at the master's level, that actually does not work in a Psy.D program like this. The program is structured with its degree completion to be that of the Psy.D. That is the goal that this program has in mind for its student, is to become a clinical psychologist via the Psy.D degree. So again, that's a 5-year program, and it does prepare you to become a clinical psychologist. Prepares specifically as well for licensure, of course, as a clinical psychologist. We'll talk a little bit more about licensure too later on. So here's a breakdown of the 5 years that you can see in front of you. The first 4 years do take place on site at our campus in Sterling, Virginia. And you can see the breakdowns there for years 1 through 4. In the 5th year, every student, again, in these Psy.D programs, again, across the nation, including, of course, DMU, you would engage, ideally in your 5th year, you would be engaging in your pre-doc internship program. And that internship could take you anywhere in the nation. I would say that just for relational comparisons, I would say it's kind of similar if you think about medical doctors, and you've probably heard of them having residencies. It's an official part of the program, but it is the doctor going out and kind of really putting to practice what they've learned to date. It's a very similar concept to the internship in a Psy.D program. It's taking everything that you've learned in the previous 4 years, all of your clinical experience up to that point, and you're putting it to test in a pre-doc internship under supervision. And you are going through a process to select a site. It's a nationwide selection process. It's a big deal. And the students really do look forward to it. It's really the pivotal point in the program is getting that pre-doc internship. Because once that pre-doc internship is completed and successfully completed, that is when you're eligible for graduation. So it's a really big deal. So in that 5th year, it would be, I would say, very probable to actually be moving out of the state of Virginia, away from DMU's campus to anywhere else in the nation. You do, as a student, know ultimately where you're going. Of course, it's not a surprise, but you are applying to different sites throughout the country, and a selection process takes place. And there's something called match day, where you learn where you are matched at for that 5th year. So again, just the takeaway here is understanding that 4 years are spent with us in the general area of DMU's campus in Sterling, Virginia, but that 5th year then in your pre-doc internship someplace in the United States, at an approved site. And again, lots more on that to come as you consider applying to and learning about the Psy.D program. I do want to take a quick moment and just break down years 1 through 4. Year 1 is completely an academically based year. You do start your research for your dissertation in our program right away. We start getting you talking about and thinking about your dissertation. And the dissertation is a phenomenal thing for you as a Psy.D student. It really is your opportunity to put your ideas and your work out there for, in a dissertation form. So we really do set you up for success in that area by starting you out right away, year 1, thinking about that. Year 2, you continue in coursework, on site in the program, and you're also beginning your first externship experience, which means you're seeing clients in a clinical setting in an externship capacity. You're actually doing that with us at our clinic. We have a clinic in the university. So your first year, if you will, we're kind of training you up in your externship before we send you out to a local externship site. And year 3, you would continue with your coursework. Again, year 3, you do take a dip down in coursework. You're not taking quite as much as you did the 2 previous years, but you're engaging on more serious externship opportunity with more hours that is outside of DMU's clinic. It would be in an external clinic in the general community in our Sterling, Virginia area, could include DC, even parts of Maryland, perhaps. It just depends again on where you end up going for your externship. And basically year 3, that same pattern is continued in year 4. Year 4, you're finishing up your coursework. You're really ramping up on your dissertation. A lot of students are even finishing their dissertation in year 4, the writing of it, and they're preparing for their defense in the 5th year. And again, in that 4th year, they're doing another externship locally with more hours, ideally more responsibility, a little more intensity there, really preparing you well to become an excellent clinician and really gearing you up for that 5th year where you're finishing your dissertation and defending and engaging in that pre-doctoral internship, okay? We do want to share here as well on this slide, we're actually very fortunate in our program. We work very, very hard to ensure that in that 5th year, that pre-doc internship, that we have 100% placement. So we've continued to maintain that stat that we do get 100% placement across the board. Usually, again, everybody is at an APIC site at minimum, and we do have an annual placement of somewhere between 75 and 80% of those students doing a pre-doc internship will place at an APA accredited site, which is a big deal. So we've got some pretty good data there with the internship placement. All right, I am going to take a quick moment. I do want to check the chat and the Q&A, make sure that we've, if anybody has questions, that we are going to go ahead and make sure to address those. And I don't see any in there right now, but again, if you have questions, do go ahead and feel free to put them in the chat or into the Q&A box, and we will we'll definitely make sure that those get answered. And again, I do want to take a quick moment and pause as well. For the attendees, you should all be able to see, again, myself and Isaiah kind of off in the corner, and then the main screen is the PowerPoint. If that's not the case, let me know. I can try to do some adjusting there. I think we're set, but I always like to check in. It would be kind of a bummer to have to sit here and listen to this and not have at least some reference in slides. So I want to make sure you're all set there. So if you can let me know that would be great. Okay, sounds like we're doing all right there, you guys. I appreciate the feedback. Very helpful, by the way. All right, thanks everyone. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get through these next few slides. These are the 6 kind of key areas of competency achieved through our program. I'm going to go through them quickly. Again, we've kind of shortened some of these things down just because we do want to make time for Isaiah. We know that it's really great to have that perspective from a student. So I'm pushing a little bit here to get through this so we can move on to Isaiah here shortly. So here are the 6 areas of competency that we do achieve through our program. Of course, foundations in psychological science and research, integrity in practice. That's just huge. That should be a given, but it really is something that we pride ourselves in is turning out amazing psychologists who really understand what it means to have integrity in practice. Now, part of that I want to share, it's not just a concept that we just kind of say, it really goes right back to our model of integration. It comes back to us implementing that Catholic Christian philosophical and anthropological view of the person, which believes that each person is created with an inherent dignity and inherent integrity. So we acknowledge that right from the start when seeing our clients, that is automatically built in. It's what it means to be human automatically, is to have inherent dignity and inherent integrity. And so we really do value that. And that's a key concept that we make sure that you understand coming out of our program. Further, of course, the hallmark that I mentioned before, assessment and diagnosis. A big, place to put a pin in would be right here for those of you that are pretty familiar with programs, with Psy.D programs. I want to note here and highlight, if you will, that our program has additional credit hours, more than a couple of classes extra, if you will, extra in assessment and testing. That is a huge attribute of our program. And our students turn out very, very well and have great competency in their ability to conduct assessment and determine diagnoses. And that, again, that's a real hallmark of our program, is this extra training that we, again, this is our faculty who created our curriculum, or determining, what, students would do better if they had a little extra work in this area of assessment and testing, or in that area of assessment and testing. That then has become an official part of our program. We have additional coursework in this area, which adds significantly to your competency and really does prepare you very, very well then in those externship and internship experiences. It's actually feedback that even myself in admissions, I hear all the time about how well trained our students are. And that really does come from this third point right here of assessment and diagnosis, testing, and adding that extra coursework in there for our students. Therapeutic intervention, again, key component of this, but it is important to understand that clinical psychology, we have that assessment and testing piece, but we also have the therapeutic intervention piece. It's what makes clinical psychology so comprehensive, is that we really go from A to Z, from getting that initial understanding deeply of our client through testing and assessment, all the way through understanding them, and implementing, creating a treatment plan, implementing that treatment plan, and that's comes directly through that therapeutic intervention. So we go from testing and assessment and diagnosis potentially all the way through to implementing a thorough, comprehensive treatment plan. Okay. Further, we do talk a lot about in the program, and this, again, key component is professional roles. As you might have noticed in that APA.org definition of psychology, clinical psychology, there are multiple roles that a clinical psychologist takes on in their work. And that's actually important for us to share with, and teach in our program, is really what are all those different roles and preparing you for those. So not just the idea of therapist. It's like, it's a lot more than that. There's a lot of professional areas which you can be involved in as a psychologist. So we teach those. And again, it's a high valued component of our program. And then, of course, kind of tying in with the second bullet is clinical practice from a Catholic integrated perspective. Again, another hallmark for our program. Again, completely unique to us is that full integration. All right, I do want to take a minute. Here's a little bit from a few students that are in our program right now. And it's kind of fun to just take a moment and read a little bit about why they like our program. We're not going to focus too much on this slide tonight because we have Isaiah with us. So it's like we have the ability, to have him here. So we're going to kind of move quickly through this. But I did want to just acknowledge this and give you guys a chance to read through that. Okay. In the meantime, I'm going to answer two questions while you guys look at this slide. And I'm also going to go ahead and move to the next slide, which is about our faculty. We have got a couple of questions here that I'll answer while you guys look through those slides. One is, do students receive a stipend for extern and pre-doctoral internships? Let me answer that very briefly. Externships are not paid. That's universal. Typically in study programs, that externships are not able to be paid. It's considered like basically coursework. That's the reason for that. But however, pre-doctoral internships, because of their level and the skills that they're requiring, and again, it's different. That's a whole other stage, if you will, of the program. You really do have to understand that an externship and an internship, while sounding similar, are very different. When you hit that internship, that's you're there. I mean, you should be at a really high level in your program, and you should be very, really ready for that next step of engaging that internship, fine-tuning your skills so that you can graduate very competently, as a clinical psychologist. So the pre-doc internships are paid. You do receive a stipend. I will share that the stipends vary significantly. As you can imagine, it's based a little bit on like region, maybe responsibility levels, organizations that you work for. So for example, an internship, a pre-doc internship, even an APA accredited one in the Midwest may not pay as much as an APA accredited internship on a coast. Again, it's living expenses that are involved in those determinations. What our students offer us as feedback is that the internships typically across the board, they are able to pay for your living expenses while you're living there for that year. So that's a good thing, is that it does offer you that ability to cover your expenses while you're engaged in that internship. So that final year, you are receiving a stipend there. The next question that came up is transfer of credits possible for students who already have a master's degree or courses or credits in a related field? Yes, in short, transfer credits are possible. It's important to note that across these programs, not just DMU, but across Psy.D programs in general, we're speaking again about AP accredited programs. These programs are comprehensive. They're built to be comprehensive from A to Z. So these institutions do want and they need you to have their full education. So do expect some pretty tight limits on the number of credits that you can transfer in. Right now, I think DMU is kind of right in the middle. They're at 18 credit hours. Some are less, some are 12 or 15. The maximum I've ever seen is maybe 24, and that's actually quite rare. So 18 credit hours is what you could bring into our program. Again, do know that this is a part of the accreditation. This is actually a part of what and how, what creates a good Psy.D program is having a comprehensive program. So just note that that's not even a DMU thing. That is almost a universal thing across accredited Psy.D programs. Okay, that there's going to be a limit there to what you can transfer in, and it's going to be around that 18-hour mark. That's a pretty common number that you'll see there. So I hope that answers those couple of questions that you had. Thank you for those, by the way. I do want to touch on licensing. Again, I'm trying to push through this. I'm gonna go quickly through this. The important thing to understand about licensing is that licensing is something that happens after you graduate. Again, that is a part of the Psy.D field, not a DMU attribute that is universal in the field. Licensing does not begin until you've completed a program, okay? And that's even the case with other mental health professions as well. It's a post-graduation activity, which the student or the new graduate engages themselves. So you as a student who's finished your degree, or you can start it a little bit before graduation, and the faculty at DMU actually help you with that. We do train you and actually give you understanding of what licensure is, what you need to know, how to prepare for it for your state that you're hoping to be licensed in. Again, you're not going to be, in the dark on that one. We're definitely going to be sharing with you how to pursue that process. Again, remember, the university wants you licensed. We want you to be successful. We want you to walk out knowing how to navigate this process. And do keep in mind that everybody who is graduating from a mental health profession like this is pursuing the same thing as you are. So you're all in it together, if you will. So it's something that you do initiate. It's student initiated. It happens after graduation. And it takes about 1 year of supervised clinical experience to achieve licensure, okay? So those are, again, a few little hallmarks there regarding licensure. Okay, that's a great question. Someone asked, and I knew this would pop up. Someone asked, since CMU is in Virginia, will students be prepared for licensure specifically in Virginia or other states? Now, granted, our program does, of course, we're going to meet those Virginia standards. So certainly, the thing that's important to understand is that it is state dependent, but there is some universality with the APA accreditation. So our program is built to that APA accreditation standard. We're very fortunate. We actually go past that, as I mentioned, with those extra courses in testing and assessment. And also I didn't even mention this, but we have additional courses, of course, because of integration, where we teach integration. So you've got a little bit above and beyond. So within the Psy.D program, you're going to find that there's more consistency from state to state. So in short, yes, of course, our program is going to be licensable in the state of Virginia, but because there is more universality with the Psy.D degree in general, a lot of students find that they're prepared for many, many states, okay? Again, I'm not gonna say blanket across the board every state. That's something we can't say as a university. But again, you're going to find that across the board, there's consistency there with states' requirements, okay? With the Psy.D program. Counseling, social work, those vary a little bit more, but Psy.D thankfully is a little more consistent. So I hope that answers the question. I know a couple of you had that question, okay? I hope that answers that for you, all right? Let me check on anything else. Okay. Oops, I'm so sorry, you guys. I'm kind of going a little, I think I skipped ahead there a couple. All right. So this one is, I know the slide I had it before, but I'm not having a difficult time going backwards. We'll go ahead and talk about this. One of the things we want you to keep in mind, we're going to talk here about like making the tuition affordable, and how how much the program costs, those kind of details. The thing I want you to keep in mind that this is an investment. So we talked about this. There's a slide a couple back that talks about like if you purchase a car, it's not really an investment depreciates. Remember that? And I've said this in other webinars. My dad always taught me, Tamby, a car is never an investment. It's a liability because it depreciates in value. Certainly it's useful. Certainly you need it, but it's very clear that it does not increase in value. It doesn't offer financial value in and of itself. It's a liability. Education, I think, is something that we really want to acknowledge that it is an investment. It does appreciate, it does bring a value. Obviously, there's the value of the field and what it does for just personal edification. The fact that you're able to be in a helping profession, serving other people, really bringing authentic, holistic, deep flourishing to families and to individuals. I mean, that's right there. I mean, it's a pretty beautiful career. And the fact that that's also something that can be monetized for you, that in the sense that you are able to earn a living doing that, really does, I guess you could say, it not only truly is a financial investment, but it's also a deep personal investment. And so we really try to acknowledge both of those within the university, that there's the personal part, and then there's also the professional part. We understand that our students are doing this as a profession. One of the things I didn't mention earlier, I mean, I don't always mention it in every webinar, but the program even encourages students learning how to tithe through their talent as a clinical psychologist. Something that's encouraged in our program is tithing of this talent, and as well as, of course, being your profession. But this being an investment, you do actually see an increase. So you are investing initially in the education, but you're getting a return off of that. This program is 122 credit hours. It's 1,095 per credit hour. So it comes out at around 133,000 for the entire program. That's all 5 years. So it's a little different in pricing from undergrad. Undergrad, some folks might be more used to paying, like, this is how much it is each year to go to university. In graduate school, you're going to find that it's priced by the credit hour. So like all inclusive, you're going to be talking around 140,000. That's tuition and fees. Okay. For all 5 years. Okay. That's what we're talking about there. So 122 credit hours over 5 years, around the $140,000 mark. I want to be very clear. We acknowledge that, that's the number. That's without aid. Okay. That's without any kind of aid offering of any kind. That's the raw number. And then you do have to account for your living expenses as, a part of your educational endeavor as well, and how you do, compensate for those expenses for living. And a lot of folks do that. And there's just many, many ways that you can take care of your living expenses. What I wanted to do on this slide is highlight a little bit of the scholarship opportunities we have. We have a lot of different scholarships. Some of these, they can be combined. One of the things about our program is we try very, very hard to ensure that all of our students receive some kind of aid if they qualify. You do have to qualify. You fill out the FAFSA. We do ask that you apply for scholarships. I did put the website for financial aid down there so you can learn more through the financial aid website. But we do take pride in our ability and our efforts to offer scholarships to qualifying students. We also have a 50% scholarship. We do one per cohort. So each year we are offering 50% off of tuition to one member coming into the cohort. Our cohorts average between 10 and 20. So again, if you're a well-qualified student, it's actually a pretty good number in your favor to receive a 50% off. Again, that would be for a well-qualified student, but I definitely want to talk about that because that's a really big deal for us, is to have that scholarship. That is the maximum scholarship that we do offer, and it is academically based. Beyond that, we do have a Psy.D transfer scholarship in there. We've got international student scholarships, public servant scholarships, Patriot scholarships, Faith and Hope scholarships. And again, you can combine some of these, and our financial aid will help you to be able to learn how to do that, just how to apply. Admissions will also be able to assist you further with applying for aid. But the takeaway here is to understand that we really do take aid very seriously, and we do really want to help you to cover the cost of your tuition through a combination of student loans, scholarships. Some students even do external scholarships to help as well. There's lots of ways in which we can assist you with this with covering the expenses related to the program. And do know that it's doable. Before I kind of move on to this one side, I think it's important to share with you that to remember that every student that comes to DMU has faced the same questions that you face, about even, the move, if you're moving from far away, getting into the university and into the program, understanding clinical psychology, and understanding financial aid and how to make this financially work. I mean, the answer is, it is very doable. And so we encourage you not to get discouraged, but rather to seek out our support and our help. And we're really glad to show you, how that can be made possible for you. Okay. Again, if you have any questions on that, do feel free to let me know on anything related to finances. Quickly going to try to push this entrance requirements. We do require a baccalaureate degree. Minimum 3.0 on a 4.0 scale is required for consideration. You do have to, also, we do prefer a background in psychology, although it's not required. We do ask that you consider the whole process here of filling out the application, submitting supporting documents like your letters of recommendations via our form, GRE scores, begin the financial aid process, transcripts, all that good stuff. We are actually, this year, I do want to share there. I do see that there's a couple, like an error on bullet 5 that I didn't catch earlier. We are not doing Zoom interviews this year. We're very pleased to share that we are going to make every effort to offer all of our interview days in person. We really value that in-person interaction. We understand what it brings to you as a prospective applicant to actually come to our campus, to meet our faculty, meet our staff, meet our students, and just have that experience. So this year, we're, again, unless something changes with the pandemic, we are going to be offering all of our interview days associated with, of course, the application deadlines in person in Sterling, okay? And then the last step, of course, is we just note that our terms begin each August, just once per year, all right? There are a couple things here. This is kind of a recap of the previous slide. I did want to just take note on this slide of the GRE code. It's 5639 under Divine Mercy University. That's something I really wanted you to take away. We also do have a $55 application fee that you all should have an email to that gives you the code. If you want to we are doing an app waiver code. So if you want to have that $55 fee waived, you can do that. And again, even as a part of attending this webinar, you get that the application fee waived, okay? I do want to share with international applicants, I'm not going to go through all of this, but if you do have a first language that is other than English, you would be required to take the TOEFL or the IELTS test. Further, if you have an international transcript from a university out of the United States, you would also need to do a course-by-course evaluation. And again, our admissions team can help you with all of those details. I did want to share here, I know I'm pushing, guys. I hope I'm not going too fast for you. You will get all of this in an email to you as well, so you can always review that. And everything I've shared here is also available throughout the website. And I'm, again, happy to answer questions after this through email as well. We have 3 application deadlines. You as an applicant can choose any of these 3 that works for you. You might say, well, okay, well, why 3? And the reason for 3 is we acknowledge that not everybody is able to all be ready to apply at like one particular deadline. We acknowledge that it takes time for the GRE, maybe you're discerning, all different kinds of factors you play into your application process. So we do have 3 options available to you. I do want to share here with you that if you are an academically well-qualified student, I do want to share that the October 29th deadline is the deadline that you're going to want to shoot for. That deadline will offer you the most consideration for the 50% scholarship. And again, remember that the 50% scholarship is by application only, meaning you do have to actually apply for it. And it is for those who have a 3.5 undergraduate GPA or higher, okay? If you're in that category, you're going to want to take note of the October 29th deadline. Further, I do want to share that you're going to see like the deadline and you're going to see an interview date. Very important to note what this means. I do really hope, I hope this all makes sense to everyone, but at DMU, we have an interview, we have a deadline, and then we have an interview date that's required. So if you're planning on making that October 29th deadline for your application, that means all materials, everything has to be in by that October 29th deadline. Further, it means you should be prepared to interview on November 12th. Interviews are not guaranteed, but if you are invited to interview, that interview date would be November 12th. And you can see the other 2 deadlines below, December 31st interview date January 14th, final deadline February 18th, interview would be March 4th. Now, that's a pretty short timeline between when everything's due and when your interview is. And you don't know if you're invited to interview until everything's in. We review it and then issue you an invitation. So one of the things I really encourage applicants to do is try very hard to get things in even 2 to 3 weeks before that deadline. Because basically, as soon as your entire application package is complete, we will review it as quickly as possible and then issue you an invitation to interview if you qualify. You want as much time as possible for planning, especially if you're having to fly or travel a long distance or take a day off of work or school. You want to know that well in advance. So I actually encourage folks to look at the date here and back it up 3 weeks and make that your deadline. So you just have plenty of time to get things in and plan, God willing, that you're interviewed. And we really do try to interview everyone who's qualified. Again, we don't guarantee it, but we make every effort to interview everyone who's qualified. Okay. If you have questions about that, let me know. I do want to take a moment and as well, kind of in line with the idea of visiting campus and interviewing, we do have an open house coming up on September 24th. It's about 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. It's a full day. This is actually great because it's a no pressure day. There's no interviews this day. This is just a come and see kind of day where you can actually come to the interview or come to the campus for this visit day. Again, no interviews. There's a faculty roundtable. And we really do cover, in this day, we cover in detail so much about the program. We have a panel with students. It really is a great, great day. So I really encourage all of you, if you are serious about the university, again, we recognize as a huge endeavor. It's 5 years of your life. It's a lot of personal investment, financial investment, a lot of discernment goes into this. It's definitely worth your time and your investment in coming here to visit us on September 24th. So if you're interested in that, let us know. Again, you should already have an invitation in your email. If you don't, reach out. I'm going to get you one. But do go ahead and mark that date, okay, as an option, just to visit, no pressure. Again, this does bring us to the end of the webinar here. Finally, Isaiah has been so patient. Again, take away here my email and our phone number for our office. Without further ado, what I'd like to do right now is go ahead and ask Isaiah to unmute, turn on his camera, and I want to just open this up for Q&A with everybody here, and for Isaiah to share a little bit, anything that I've missed or any thoughts. So while you guys are thinking about questions that you might have, and again, I encourage you here, you have a student in front of you. I definitely you want to encourage you to ask questions. What I'd like to do, Isaiah, is just ask if you want to start with a little introduction about yourself, just share some things that you would like folks here to know about you, maybe how it's relative to the program, and just kind of take it from there.
I'm originally from the state of South Dakota. And so I grew up there most of my life, went to school at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln. I studied psychology there, but I kind of intended to go into the medical field. And then after, kind of in the midst of my undergraduate, I discerned that I wanted to go to the seminary, the Catholic seminary, to study to be a priest. So I had this love for psychology that was kind of there, I think, from an early age, just wanting to know how people function, why they do the things that they do. And then I found myself in seminary learning all these philosophical truths about humans. One of the first courses I took was philosophy of the human person, learning person's body and soul, and that there's this profound dignity attached to being human. Later discerned out of the seminary, returned to Nebraska to finish up my degree, and deciding at this point, well, I don't really want to go into medicine, but I do have this desire to care for people. And I also have learned, again, this philosophy about humans and their goodness. So I took a year off. I built pipe organs for a year. I always love telling people that. It's a pretty unique job. It was fun. But ultimately that led me, I decided to then do a year of service with the homeless in Denver, with an organization called Christ in the City. And there I like to say that all the things I had been learning about and dreaming about psychology, philosophy, it was this incarnational experience of encountering people on the street in this profound suffering, mental anguish, substance abuse, what have you. And just actually experiencing that firsthand made everything kind of click for me. Okay, I have the ability to affect change and bring hope to people in the worst moments of their life. And so for me at that point, it was just very clear everything was starting to converge, and I felt more so that I wanted to pursue psychology. And so DMU was kind of my first choice because everything that I had been learning about kind of just again converged here, right? The psychology, the philosophy, the theology, and it just seemed like the perfect fit. So I applied, and long story short, I got in my second year now, and it's been absolutely more than I could have hoped for. I like have so much. I've had so much knowledge shoved in my brain the last year. I like don't even know how it's possible, but it's just been a beautiful and awesome journey. So
That's pretty awesome. I know I've had the privilege of hearing Isaiah's story more than once, and it's always great to hear it every time because it's just it really speaks to the heart of the mission and why one would want to potentially pursue this kind of work. I mean, it really is. It just shows it's so much more than a profession. It really is a calling. What I'd like to do, I want to take a moment and just see if there's any, again, if anyone has questions here. There is this unique opportunity to like dive into kind of the world perspective from a student, right? A DMU world perspective, from a student's lens, if you will. I do want to give a chance to see if we have any questions that pop up. But while we're waiting for questions to come up, I did want to ask you, Isaiah, if you think with anything that I've covered, especially, I mean, I know the big hot buttons for prospective students are going to be like finances and understanding integration and kind of like what is clinical psychology? How do you know if you're a fit? Yeah, I don't know if there's any of those you feel like you'd like to address. I know those are kind of the three that I hear a lot. If I have to just put things into buckets, those would be like the three buckets that I hear a lot from prospective students. So I don't know if you could pick one of those and talk a little bit about it. I think that could be helpful to some of the folks here.
sure. What was the second one? You said finances,
So it would be
integration.
finances and integration. Yeah.
Okay, and then clinical psychology.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
sure.
understanding clinical psych, like compare contrast.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. So that's kind of a tricky one. Counseling and psychology have so much overlap in the mental health field, and I think it can be kind of tough to like parse out the differences. I think you covered a bit in the realm of clinical psychology, especially looking at being a psychologist. Assessment is a huge part of that. So the ability to give and administer IQ tests, personality tests, like maybe you've heard of the Rorschach test, like that's an ability you have as a clinical psychologist to make these determinations, to make diagnoses, and also to be a therapist, right? So if you have this desire to sit with people in their suffering, you have that as part of clinical psychology. And then kind of the assessment being unique to psychologists. You can also teach. That's not necessarily unique to psychologists, but it definitely you can teach at a higher level if that's something you wanted to adjunct at a university later on. You have that ability. Counseling, and I've had a lot of friends start to get into the field of counseling. It's usually a master's degree, and you're doing a lot of those same things, right? Like sitting with people in their suffering, but you're not necessarily diving in as deep to, let's say, the biological. So as psychologists, we're looking at brain and how that affects things. If it highlights things at all. So this is a 5-year program, and you're taking, your first couple of years, you take 5 classes a semester. I have friends that are doing a master's program. It's 3 years of taking 1 to 2 classes per semester. So I think that just speaks to how much more information you're learning. You're covering more theories in depth, that type of thing. So it's just a much, much deeper look at everything. Happy to answer more questions on that. I feel like that's a general kind of look at that.
So we do have a couple questions here. This is kind of getting into these are some good ones. Brass tacks, so let's see. Like here's one of them. It's like, what type of career backgrounds do people have when they come into the program? And then the rest are, so we'll start with that one. So what kind of career backgrounds do people have when they come into the program?
Sure. You see all sorts of things. That's kind of one of the beautiful things. You don't necessarily have to have a psychology degree to do this program. We have a wide variety. There's several priests and religious who are a part of the program and being sent by their diocese or by their order to study so that they can minister to other priests or seminarians. I know there's been people that have studied law in the past.
Mm-hmm.
You do have some people who have been in the mental health field, so counselors who have done counseling for a while and decided they wanted that something more, that deeper dive into things, so they come to study. I know people that have been in business, just in my cohort alone, business people. I'm trying to remember. A lot of
It is,
missionaries.
yeah, I would say mission. I was thinking that too. Missionaries and service. I'd say as a broad category is like service oriented fields. I know that's like that covers them all. I mean, because we've even had some folks who've done like human resources who've come into our program, and that is, I mean, that can be arguably like it's again kind of human contact, human services. That's been a few of those individuals who are working, like as you mentioned. I would say in ministry, I would say again, a part of that would be like ministry of some kind. So maybe not missionary, but like ministry could be it. And like you said, then we have people who come out of the blue. I think the law is a great example. Business is a great example where they're just like, okay, I really feel called to this, like a second, almost like a second career or second vocation. Yeah. So I'm going to keep going through these questions. There's some good ones here. So what would you say are the average hours a week spent in class study and then studying? So like how many like hours in class and then how much studying like in hours per week?
Yeah. So the first couple years, it's a lot more academic heavy. And as you go through the program, you shift to more of a clinical focus. So I would say the first couple years, you're doing somewhere between 15 and 17 credit hours per week. So that's just in class time. And then what's there's the technical rule of I think it's 3 hours for every hour spent in class. So multiply that, you're looking somewhere 40, 50. I'm not math. This is not my degree, so I'm not sure exactly what that number is. But you'll find that there's like always plenty to do and something to be reading. I would say you can expect it to be like pretty much a full-time um, type of thing. Like 40 hours a week, you could definitely expect to be doing that. I think it depends, like anything. It depends on the week, depends on what the professors have assigned. But I think you can pretty much, if you think of it kind of like a job, that's helpful. And then when it's like not as intense as a job, you have those rare moments. It's kind of a pleasant surprise.
I would say too that as you ramp up further into the program, the pace does change. I mean, I would say I feel like again, I just want to add to it as Isaiah is saying, I kind of want to emphasize it more that that our experience from again feedback from students is really like Isaiah said, it really is 40 hours a week plus. When you start putting internships and dissertation work, or excuse me, I misspoke, externships, dissertation work and coursework like all together, it really is very intensive. I mean, I think that's fair. I mean, but it's again a good kind of intensive in the sense that you want to be doing it, is what I've heard from students. Like, it's not a bad thing. It's just it's you're really busy. You're kind of juggling three distinct things. Each one of those things on their own is an endeavor, but you're putting them all together at the same time. So I think it can really ramp up. And that kind of leads to one of the questions. Isaiah, would you feel like that's pretty accurate? Like kind of between the two of us, the pretty
Yeah. Yeah, I
yeah
would agree with
okay.
that. Yeah.
That kind of ties into someone asked about part-time jobs and TAs. I'm happy to have you talk about that one if you want to, just again, kind of knowing the weight of it. Can can people do part-time jobs? Do they? What do you hear as a student? TAs, that kind of thing.
Sure. Yeah. So that's always a big question is, can I work while doing this? And the university is very generous in offering an assistantship program for the 4 years you're on campus, and you can work 10 hours a week. And usually your first couple of years you're doing administrative work, just because you don't like quite have the knowledge and the skills to be like in a TA position. So, but those are offered later in your third and fourth years. You can work for professors, helping out for classes as assistants, teaching assistants. So that is by far the most common work that I see people do is for the university for tuition reduction. anything outside of that is just it's very difficult to pull off because you have to find a schedule that is like flexible. And I don't really know of anyone who does that. It's just very, yeah, your schedule it's kind of all over the place. So it's hard to find work outside the university, but the assistantship is something that a lot of people do take part in, and it's very helpful for reducing tuition, and it's on campus, so you don't have to go as far for it.
That's a good answer, a very good answer to that. One of the questions that came along kind of with the finances a little bit is just how do students support themselves financially? I am going to kind of backtrack a little bit after this one, just but I think that's a good one to talk about. It gets back into my investment piece. And I apologize that we're having to kind of push through some of this a little bit. But I think it's worth hearing your perspective of like, how do students pay for this? What's the value on it? As someone who is making the investment, you chose yes. And so I don't know if you're comfortable sharing a little bit about that.
Sure.
Love to hear.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, the large part of your financial burden falls onto student loans, unless you have enough accumulated wealth from a previous career or something like that. Almost everyone here is utilizing student loans for their day-to-day living. And that is certainly something that you have to take into account, right? Like you're going into debt. And that's a reality, but I think what Tambi's saying of it being an investment is so important, right? Like it absolutely pays off. Like down the road, it takes a lot of work to get here, to go through the program. But in the end, I think you can feel comfortable knowing that the mental health field is not going away anytime soon. And I think the pandemic has made that very clear, that the mental health field, if anything, is going to be increasing. I guess that's not necessarily a great thing. We don't want that to be the case, but it seems like it is the case. And so as a psychologist, you're always going to have job security, and you're going to make enough to like take care of your loans. So I feel like that's something that's very comforting to know. And then also just talking about investment and the payoff of like bringing hope to people's lives and bringing healing. I think that's something far beyond what the reward of money could ever give you. So I think that's something to keep in mind, is like, it is an investment. You can't think of it in 1 year chunks. Yeah, you have to be thinking long-term about things and taking a bit of a hit in some ways to prepare yourself to go to this next level.
I really think that's well said. And I always like it when you talk about that, because you own the reality. And I do want to share that Psy.D programs, it is an area that you're not going to find. I'm actually very comfortable talking about finances because I know where DMU is in the scheme of other Psy.D programs. We're not the least expensive, we're not the most expensive, but I also know very well our value. I know how well our students do. I know how desired they are in externships and internships, how when they walk out of DMU, even postdocs. I mean, that's something that Isaiah has been learning about, is postdocs. Been talking more about it, even in the office, chatting about it. We've got, students in postdocs at Georgetown and at Princeton. I mean, we do well, so the investment in this program specifically does pay off. As you mentioned, it's hard to think about that a little bit, that, mental health needs are increasing. But I would say that that's something that, having that spiritual perspective, is the world is broken. We all have our own brokenness with us as well. And the reality is it is a good in our world to have this kind of training available and to be able to be a part of answering that. So, yes, it's certainly disheartening to see that the mental health need is rising. And at the same time, I would say all the more beauty that we're able to be there to answer to that. And along with that, where it comes back into finances, is understanding that now more than ever, with the awareness and the acknowledgement and the additional acceptance of mental health being a real area that we need to care about, frankly, as humans, like in our own lives, and taking care of ourselves, and just acknowledging like mental health challenges are part of even the normal human experience. You're seeing things like insurance companies covering mental health more widely. You're seeing organizations investing more deeply in providing mental health services, to students, employees, et cetera. So that's increasing. And what that means as well for us on a financial capacity is just all of that does trickle down to the mental health professional. Even things like one of the things we haven't talked about really specifically in this webinar is just there are postgraduate opportunities that can help you to pay that student loan debt. And we haven't really talked about that, but there's actually a lot of programs out there. They do vary a lot, even from year to year. But there are opportunities that you can seek out that help pay student loans, post graduation. And I don't want that to be lost, because that certainly is a possibility. And again, I kind of go back to that. I think about the beauty, and I mean, I'm talking to somebody who was a missionary here. Isaiah was a missionary. He knows that he sacrificed that time and gave so freely, to those that he worked with. How beautiful it is that you can actually continue that ministry. You can continue that gift. You continue using that talent, and still tithe with that talent. Serving, in a pro bono capacity, and things like that. But at the same time, that's going to be something where you can actually continue using that gift and that burning desire, and yet still be able to provide for yourself in your future. I think that's something that I really think is just, it's the longer I've been at DMU, the more that's been imparted to me, is because I just see so many people loving their work. And I think that's really beautiful. They're loving their work. I mean, this is their work, is being able to serve and to help, so I know that's a long spiel from me sharing on that, but again, you can kind of tell I'm pretty passionate about that. But I want to get to some more questions here. There's some good ones. Let's see. This is a good one. I like this one a lot. What have students said they wish they knew since starting graduate school? That's a totally an Isaiah question.
Oh my gosh. I got to think about that one. The students wish they knew since starting grad school. Gosh, I don't know. I have to say that I feel like I came in very much. I don't think you can ever have no expectations, but I think I came in kind of close to that, of just open to whatever the experience would be, knowing that I don't know everything and excited for that journey. I think, yeah, I think that's a huge thing. It's just like that openness, like coming in with that, and knowing, I guess, that you might come in with one plan, and almost surely you'll be doing something like different. Like you might come in thinking, oh, I would definitely want to work with kids. And then you'll be exposed to a population that you didn't know you had a heart for, in your work. And then all of a sudden it changes everything. So I think that's a huge thing, is just like having an openness to um, uncovering what you actually desire, like things that you didn't even know you wanted, and like uncovering what frankly, like what the Lord wants for you and what he wants to do with you as a professional, as a person. So I don't know. I feel like I didn't answer that question well, but
no, but I think that's a good one. I mean, I think that's helpful, just being like kind of the expectations of what you're setting up for yourself. To offer something a little more practical, because again, I'm not a student.
yeah.
I've heard students share things like, one of the big ones is if they wish they hadn't delayed. I was actually visiting with somebody about that today. Just wishing that they had not delayed. Like they thought about it for a while, and that once they're in it, I mean, the time, like life is short, certainly if God calls you to something at a certain time, that's life and that's how it works out. But just they were acknowledging their own delay, that they wish they'd said yes sooner, because it's like you just can't know anything. Like you can't know certain things, you can't know without trying. And so diving in, their thing was, oh, I wish I would have just started earlier, and so that was interesting. I remember thinking, I'm going to share that tonight. That was somebody's kind of wish they had. I do want to see, there's a few more questions that are popping up. I like it. Everybody's getting a little more brave. They're asking some more questions. A few things maybe we can cover quickly is how's the first semester work challenges, most challenging classes, things like that. We kind of covered it, but I thought it was a little more detailed question, but like, what's that first semester like? What are some challenges, that you're experiencing, like things you're having to navigate in that area?
Sure. I feel like in some ways my first semester was just so unique. I moved out here during a pandemic, and so my very first semester was hybrid and wearing a mask, and just I couldn't meet anyone because everything was shut down. So it was definitely a very difficult experience for me, and I think the biggest part of that was just making the adjustment to a totally different lifestyle in some ways. Obviously, I'd been a student in the past, but this is a very different feel to it. It's just you're diving into something that you're very passionate about, and it's all that. It's all psychology, which is good, but it's an adjustment. So um, that was definitely a big thing. Is just adjusting to it, getting to know your professors, getting to feel comfortable with where you're at, with what you know, and accepting that you don't know everything, and that's great, and you're going to learn more. So I think those are just the big challenges: figuring out your time commitment, your schedule, how to fit all these pieces of your life together. As far as most challenging classes, granted, I'm only starting my second year, so there are some I haven't experienced, but from what I have heard, um, the assessment classes can be fairly difficult because, again, they are a hallmark of the psychology field, and so it's something that we want to be doing well, and we want to. They're rigorous and thorough, and just making sure that we understand what we're testing and making sure that we're doing it well. So a lot of those personality assessment classes can be the more difficult ones, making sure that you're getting everything that you need to get from these tests. Um, so I think that covered every part of that question.
Good one. That's very good. There's another one here. Two people asked, so I think we should talk about this one. Two people asked almost the exact same way. What has been the most rewarding part of studying, or most rewarding experience so far of being a DMU, spiritually, emotionally, etc.?
Yeah. I would say I'm not sure I could point to one specific experience, but I can point to multiple. And right away when you start out, you take it's called like a basic interviewing class, and you're role playing with your classmates, just pretending to do therapy with your classmates. And it's very basic at this point. You're not, diving too terribly deep into, different modalities. And I just remember almost every time I've done this throughout my time here, every time I've role played, there's kind of these nerves leading up to it. Like it's just so unknown. And I remember every single time after I've done one of those, I just feel like amazing. I feel so like light. I feel very fulfilled. Even if you're like role playing someone in a very depressed state, I just remember feeling like, yes, this is it. Like this is for me, I guess maybe more like on a deep level. It's like this is what I was created to do. This is something I love so deeply. And I think that has been the most rewarding thing. It's just even the year I've been here, it's just this fire that like continues to grow, and I just grow more and more in conviction as I see, as I learn, as I apply all these things, and as I start in the clinic this year, seeing patients and clients. It's like, no, this is it. Like this is what I want to do with the rest of my life, and that's just like been so cool to grow in that love and passion.
That's awesome. Word. Thanks, Isaiah. I'm really glad that question was asked because that was a really just some really beautiful insight. I think this is a good way. I don't want to just go into like a really hard brass tack question because that was such a nice answer. I want to just enjoy that moment for a second. Someone just wants to share their thanks for being here and your experience, sharing your experiences. We talked a little bit about what it was like starting out for you, a new student, but just like they were asking, like, what was your first day like? What was it like being a student? You've shared a little bit, so just anything else to kind of, add on that kind of student experience. Yeah, or I would even say turn this one into like tips, advice, like, what should people know about it, as they prepare? Again, you mentioned the expectations, but anything else on that or that?
Yeah, gosh, my first day was just so interesting and so atypical that I don't like it was gosh, I'm trying to remember exactly. So I guess outside of school, it was just such a chaotic transition for me, moving entirely across the country in the midst of a pandemic and like hoping I could meet people. But I do remember my first day of class was like child psychotherapy and just going in, and I actually, yeah, I felt very comforted because right away, like we're diving in to child therapy. Like by the end of my first semester, I like theoretically knew how to give therapy to children through play therapy. And I think that's just a very profound thing. Like day one, like you are becoming that therapist that like you're dreaming of becoming, and you're doing it like day one. And so I remember thinking like, yeah, that was a very satisfying experience of like I had all this chaos around me, but even in the midst of that, it was like, yes, okay, you're doing what you're doing. You're getting into the field. And yeah, so that was a great thing. As far as tips, oh gosh, trying to think if I could sharpen your pencils. Like I'm trying to think of practical tips.
I'm going to throw it out there. There's again, when
Yeah.
I'm sharing something with you guys too, things like this, it's coming from things that students have told me. I think, I don't know that we've said this quite so clearly, but like malleability, I think is really important, is coming in. I actually think the students who do the best, I almost want to say it more profoundly, like the students who do the best, but I'll leave it with that. I think, just from what I'm hearing, that students who do the best are those who come in really being malleable, being open to being taught, open to being formed, open to accepting, and maybe even like, accepting slash, hearing, again, I do think, and I think Isaiah can, maybe speak on this a little more, but I do think there's, of course, you're going to encounter things you may not totally agree with or understand, maybe new perspectives. You're like, okay, that's interesting. Wow, I don't know how to think about that. But the idea of, again, you don't have to accept everything in the sense of like, oh, that's gospel. But the idea of understanding that that malleability is really essential. I will say that I'm really convicted in this thought that the malleability aids students in their success. That's something I've learned over the years just by speaking with students, just sheerly through speaking with students, that those that are like, yeah, I shouldn't have been so bullheaded when I came in, or I didn't realize how many walls I had up, or, things like that, that really being malleable, being open to being taught, and even just understanding that someone's experience has shaped them, and that, because that's just a key part of being an excellent therapist, is understanding the impact of someone's, self experiences. So I think that, I don't know, I just want to add that in. There's that malleability. I've just seen that as like a key trait to successful students, is malleability.
Yeah, and maybe just to add on to that a little bit, I think anytime that you are seeking like truth or seeking to know something, it's always like a wrestling match, right? Like you have to be in it and like willing to, like, I guess going with the wrestling analogy of like willing to like put yourself out there and like get hurt, not like physically get hurt, like you're not going to get hurt at this program, but like putting yourself in there and willing to risk being wrong, and to like wrestle with that as you come to understand what the human person is, who you are, to grow as a person, so that um, like knowing that therapy is two people in a room. It's not just one person um, like talking at the other person. It's two people forming a relationship. And so coming in, being willing to form yourself as a person, to take the truth that you learn, to integrate it within yourself and to grow, so that you can like walk with someone else as they wrestle with the truth, like the truth of who they are, the truth of who they're meant to be, how they relate to others, like all that sort of thing. So being willing to just like put yourself out there in that way.
That's really fantastic. No, very true. I do want to just take a little moment here and just acknowledge that we are sitting at like 9:15 Eastern time for this webinar. So we are past time. So I do want to acknowledge that I definitely want to honor people's time. What I'm thinking we'll do, we got a couple more questions. I'm thinking we'll spend maybe like another 10 minutes at the most answering these last two, and then close out from there. So if you need to hop off, I understand that, but I did want to at least give you, just give you the little timestamp that we're thinking about here, give you a closing time to kind of to think about. So we'll go about another 10 minutes or so, and then we'll wrap up and be done with this webinar. For those that do have to hop off, I want to just say thank you. I'll thank you again, and I'll do more formally a couple of closing announcements, but I do want to just thank everybody for being here. Your time is valuable to us, and we know this is a big endeavor. I really do hope that this has been helpful. So if you have to hop off, we understand. For those of you that want to stay, we'll try to keep it under another 10 minutes or so, if that sounds okay with everyone. I'll kind of wrap up. The last two questions here are more brass tacks. And I actually have one I want to talk about that I'll close with you, Isaiah, related to integration. So I'll give you a little heads up there. I do want to ask him to speak on integration a little bit before we close out, before we leave the webinar. This question is really about cost of living. I do want to answer this as well and just share. It says, what is the cost of living for out-of-state residents? And really, just for anybody, I mean, in-state, it depends on where you are. We are in the Northern Virginia area. The allotment just for housing and what the government says, like from student loans, is around the cost of living is somewhere around like 27,000, I believe it is. It's a little over 25. 25 to 27,000 is like an estimated cost of living. I don't know, Isaiah, we don't have to make this into a big old question. If you have anything to add to it, feel free. But I find that some students, it really depends on you. Some students, really want to live alone, and you're going to pay for that, right? Because you're living in an apartment. Some folks are open to living with housemates, and and again, housemates might mean like a house or a townhouse with like 3, 4, 5, living people, roommates. Maybe an apartment or a condo means like 2 or 3, which again shifts your cost. So I do think a big part of it, the number one thing attributing to the cost of living, is housing. So and there can be a huge variation in that. If you're talking living on your own, let's say your minimum is like $1,500 a month for an apartment, and I think that's probably not including all the utilities. If you're living with housemates, I think that job can be done all in somewhere between $700 to $900, maybe even less, right? Am I right? What do you think, Isaiah? Anything on that?
Yeah, no, I think that's pretty accurate. The number you said of like 27,000, I think, at least for a single person coming into the program,
right.
You're probably living in luxury at that point. I don't know of anyone who is spending that amount. Of course, if you're coming, with a family and that sort of thing, that those costs gets higher. But I think, yeah, your numbers as far as like apartments, I think 700 to 1,000 is pretty reasonable per month if you're living with roommates. And then food, that's kind of just, hopefully most people kind of have a sense of what they pay for food every month. And I don't think food is horribly, like, much more expensive out here than it was, say, living in the Midwest. So
I agree with that, by the way. I've actually found sometimes there's certain things that are cheaper. You have access to things that you may not someplace else, but I don't find that food is like at all more expensive here than anywhere else.
Right, exactly. So I think
you get into the heart of the city, like Washington, D.C., you might see a difference, but not where we are.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, of course, the closer you move to DC, things get much more expensive, much quicker. So, I think for me, I could reasonably say, I got some decent rent. So I think I'm closer to, 12, 13,000 per year for living expenses. I think I got some really great deals with that. And people can do even better than that, I think. So I feel like that's a fair, I obviously not guaranteeing anything, but
No,
I think
of
from
course,
my perspective, that's a lot closer to where I am for yearly costs.
Yeah. And again, there's lots of things too that if you're eating at like the food truck outside every day, 10, 12 bucks a pop every day, that adds up, versus we do a lot of students do, and we encourage carry in, carry out for lunches and snacks and things, just helping you to be budget friendly. So I hope that helps with that question. Strong qualities. This is a good one. What are the qualities of a strong candidate to be accepted into the program? First of all, I definitely think, and I really welcome your feedback too, Isaiah. Number one is there's two, it's hard to kind of put numbers to these, but like academic aptitude, but again, those minimums need to be met. The higher, the better. And then the other thing is harder to put a number to is interpersonal aptitude, is really balance of person, balance of character, understanding clinical psychology. I don't know, Isaiah, like, I think that one's actually huge and we understand that you're not, that you don't have a master's degree in psychology yet, maybe as you're applying, but we do expect that you've done a lot of what I would call lay research, non-professional research on what clinical psychology is. You've done the work comparing and contrasting to other professions. You spent some time exploring some theories, things like that. I mean, we really do want you to be able to articulate why you want to do this in a fairly high level capacity. I don't want to make that sound too daunting. I don't know, Isaiah, if you have any thoughts about, balancing that back out. But I do think that's a big one that is, important to take note of. Anything else you've seen from your experiences?
Yeah, I would say you covered that well. I think that this is not just something you mosey into, that you just kind of walk into. There is a level of, you don't have to know everything about the field. Obviously, that's why you learn. But you have to be ready to commit, right? Like when you're stepping into this 5-year program, it's really like you're stepping into a lifetime of something. Like the learning does not stop after 5 years, not even close.
Just beginning, if anything, it's just beginning. Yeah.
Seriously, that's one thing I've learned, is that I thought, 5 years and then it's like, oh, school's done. But it's just like, nope. Like you have continuing credits, but also you get that desire to learn more. So if that desire and that drive is not there to begin with, and you're not feeling like really strongly, doesn't mean you can't have, questions or even small doubts about things. But I think that's a huge part, is like knowing what you're getting into, doing some of that research, wanting to do it. Obviously the academic aptitude, knowing that you'd be able to handle these courses. And then also, because you're going to be working with people, you have to kind of like people and be okay at talking to people. I think that's something that's important. And I
think all this kind of comes out in the interview. I think that's something too, is this is the interview. I mean, so all of the kind of paper components of the application, I want to be clear, we absolutely use them as, a first entry, if you will. It's like, okay, we've got to have something here, to know a little bit about you, to make sure that the academic aptitude is there, that interpersonal aptitude is initially there. And the question that just came up is like, how heavily do you consider the GRE? We do use that. It's not a box to check at DMU. We really do look at it very seriously. It's not, we don't use it to necessarily rule you out, but it does help us to understand where you are academically, with that aptitude piece, academically speaking. So we use a lot of those paper documents to say, okay, what do we have here, just on paper from this person? All right, how are we looking so far? And then if all of that, again, checks out, like meets those minimums, then we invite you to that personal interview. And that is really where I would say the next big step is really, basically putting forth in person what we see on paper, showing us that you understand the field, that you have that sense of balance, you know how to present yourself professionally, that you've really thought deeply about the field and about what the profession means to you, that you can articulate, complex thoughts, responding to questions, about your desire, what kind of work you'd like to do, those kind of things. I mean, those are all things I think that make a great candidate, somebody who's, self-directed, a self-initiator who can work through that process independently and has done the homework, and again, moving through, it's okay to have questions about the process. That's not what I'm saying, but being able to, on your own go, okay, I know how to, navigate and research and find these answers out for myself. And then, being able to work with admissions further. I think those are all signs of a strong applicant. Again, it's really, we're looking for folks who understand what they're getting into, and show that forth through the application process. So I hope that answers those questions. It's good. We're kind of, running around right at that 10 minutes, marker that I had mentioned a moment ago. So we're getting really close to the end here. What I wanted to do is just one more time before I want to close out. I do want to give a couple quick announcements. Isaiah, I do want to end with you. But I do want to share again that we'll be sending a recording of this webinar out. You have our email address. We certainly invite you to reach out with any follow-up questions. We really want you to apply. I mean, genuinely, if you feel like this is interested you, if you're curious, if you'd like to learn more, certainly reach out. But I really want to take this time and invite you to go ahead and apply. Really, that's the next step. I think that's one of the big pieces I see is it's like, don't contemplate something that hasn't been, don't contemplate a door that hasn't been built yet, right? I mean, like build the door, right? And let's get it going is kind of the thought on that one, so you can walk through it. So really the application part is doing that. It's giving yourself that opportunity to walk through, your future as a clinical psychologist. If you don't apply, you won't know. And I do think that actually applying is a part of discerning. I really believe that. I think it's getting yourself in that idea of like, okay, I'm going to apply, like, okay, I'm going to envision myself possibly in Sterling, Virginia next year. I'm going to envision myself as a clinical psychologist. I actually think those are very big mental steps that help you with discerning if this is for you. So I just want to encourage that, if you're him-hawing, like, go ahead and try it out. Go ahead and apply. How do you feel about that? How does it feel about thinking about the things that Isaiah shared tonight? How does it feel thinking about moving to Virginia? How does it feel, thinking about a future as a clinical psychologist and the work that this would entail and the beauty of that profession. So I think all of that does come with getting started, and that's with the application process. And again, I really just want to thank everybody for being here. And I wanted just to close with Isaiah, just sharing a little bit, if you don't mind, on integration. Why DMU, Isaiah? Why integration? Like, where's the beauty in that? Like, just talking to us a little bit about that piece. I feel like we did a little bit earlier, but I really want to capture more of that because it's the DMU difference. I just thought if we can kind of close out with you sharing for a little bit on your thoughts on that.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, I think just the human person is just this profound and beautifully complex creation of God. And it is just, it's something that I think throughout history, people have tried to capture and to understand. And that's kind of where the field of psychology started with. It was just, well, how do we look at behavior and what does that mean, just watching and observing? But as it's like deepened, we've realized that humans are so much more than just animals that react to their environment and that sort of thing. And so as the Catholic tradition has done philosophically, like uncovering what does this mean that we're human, that we're made in the image and likeness of God, we find like this, again, this like beautiful and deep complexity that in some ways can't like fully be captured in this lifetime. As Catholics and as psychologists, we come to like dive into these things and to ask these questions. Okay, why is a person this way? And that's what DMU does very well is, okay, a person is a body and a soul. They're not just a physical, like I said, they're not just an animal that reacts to their environment. It's created by God. And that sets us apart, right? Just acknowledging that we have a soul sets us apart from so much of psychology. We're made in the image and likeness of God. And we are subject to the effects of sin because of the fall. But yet at the same time, we're offered like hope in all of that, right? That God knows us, he loves us, and he like awaits us and our return to him. So knowing that is like our foundation is like we are created in God's image. And when you look at a person with that lens, it changes everything. Like instead of just this human that may or may not annoy me or is, like it's no, this is like God's creation. He thought and loved this person before the foundation of the world. And from there we can ask, okay, so that's our foundation. This is how we look at the person. But then what are all these other things that contribute to them? They have a vocation. They are fulfilled by being with other people. They're like, we're made for a relationship. Taking all of these things into account that many other people don't necessarily consider, like a vocation, a supernatural vocation to marriage or the priesthood, is an important part in becoming who you were meant to be and finding hope and flourishing as a human person. So that's what makes DMU different, is that we can take these truths of, yeah, we have brains and they have chemicals and there's balances of chemicals, but what are the external, like their family, their relationships, like all of this comes together to give you this full picture of the human person. And DMU does that better than anyone else. Like this is the human person in its fullness. And how can we address these obstacles to this flourishing and help a person to become who God created them to be, and for them to find happiness in this life and happiness forever in the next. So
that's great. Well, wow, thanks, Isaiah. I mean, really, that's why I really wanted you to close on that, as I just think you did such a great job of sharing that and the why part. And I think, again, it's really authentically why DMU. It's not just like, oh, we're the best. It's like this. It's like, no, this is so much bigger than all of that. It's so much bigger, than a conceptualized, a flippant, oh, we're the best. It's like, no, it's actually something very deep, very intricate to the identity of, of a human person and really what God intended when he made all of us. Like, what did he intended us to be, and we're all still discovering that every day, So I just want to thank you, Isaiah, for being here. I know you spent extra time. I mean, Isaiah is a full-time student is doing a student assistantship. He's a busy guy, so I really appreciate you. He's in the clinic now as well, seeing clients. So it really, really takes time to be here, and I really appreciate it. And thank you for that. And I really just want to, thank everyone for being here. If I didn't get to your question, I definitely ask you to please go ahead and email us at admissions.psy.d@divinemercy.edu. If you have questions as you follow up after this webinar, feel free. Again, I just want to say thanks to all of you. And again, we'll be following up over email. And I wish you all a great night. And hopefully we'll all be in touch soon. So I'll close out with that. So thank you, everyone. Take care. Bye, Isaiah.
Thanks.
Thank you.